Okay, so based on the question of when we were 15 years old and adults making an impact in our lives, I came from a very small church, and there were a lot of adults who made a huge impact in my life, and they poured into it regularly. And my family didn't go to church, so having those adults in church made a huge difference, I think, on my call to the ministry and where I ended up as a person. And I think that same influence, that same impact is desperately needed today. That's all I got.
So, like Ray said, also grew up in a very small church. The church that my parents raised me in, by the time I got to junior high age, I was kind of the only student there, uh, which was cool because I had all these wonderful adults that I could learn from and that were pouring into me and stuff like that. By the time I got to high school, my parents let me go to my the church that my brother and sister-in-law went to because they had a youth program and a lot of my friends went there. And it was great getting to be part of a youth group in that way, in that respect. And the adult leaders that were involved in the youth ministry definitely poured into us a lot. But outside of that group, just the other members and stuff didn't really spend a lot of time with the youth or pouring into our lives, or at least that I noticed. But thankfully for me, I still had my parents' church and those adults that basically helped raise me, continue to speak life and truth into my life. And so I'm very thankful to have those people because they really did kind of help mold me into the man that I am today. As far as the church that my brother was at, yes, it would have been nice to have even more adults, but at the same time, I don't feel like I lacked simply because of the other church that I was a part of.
Yeah, so I grew up in a different situation. I grew up in a mega church here in the Fort Worth that Metroplex area, about 3,000 people strong, with about 220 in our student ministry. So I grew up, I mean, and we were known as a family in the church just because my parents served, I served, and my two older brothers were very popular in the Keller area. So everyone knew us, but to answer the question about how many people they really know us, there's only like one or two. There wasn't very many who really knew us and knew me as a kid. And at the age of 15, I was just a young kid going to church and just thinking about just going to church and hanging out with friends and going and serving and being done. Uh, so I really didn't have no one invest into me the way that some of these other guys did. Now, the second part of the question is, if I think that I would look at church differently if there was if someone who would invested into me, like, and not done some of the crazy stuff that I did, and not just go to church just to go to church, but actually go and really get an encounter with Jesus. So I think that if I had an adult reach out and invest into me besides my parents, obviously, that it would be one of those times that I think that I would have learned so much different stuff and so much different things. And I didn't get called to ministry till 2007, and I was in that church for 5 years. So but there's so much I could have learned. I think churches today really need to connect with each other, from the adults to the students to the kids, all the way down, so that when they do come, they do have situations in their lives that they're well connected.
And so, unlike the three of you guys, I did not grow up in church at all. I didn't have my first church experience wasn't until I truly experienced with church, other than a sporadic handful of times, was when I was 16. I first started going to a church and got saved at that church. Prior to that, I had no body that really knew me at any church because we didn't go. Maybe more than like I said, a handful of times prior to that. And so I think it would have made a huge difference. Like you said, Casey, it would have made a huge difference. One, in my life, I would have made some better choices because at that age, I was more interested in how people viewed me. And so I really would want to um, make people proud, kind of have somebody to look up to. And so that would have been a huge deal for me if somebody had taken an interest in me, one. And two, like you said too, Casey, I think it was you, maybe it was Robert, it would have changed my view of church. Sometimes I look at church in a kind of with an outsider's view, which is weird, I know, to say that as somebody that goes to it's in seminary, it's a youth pastor, executive pastor, whatever. I feel like I'm an outsider a lot of times at church, just because I didn't have that experience growing up. I've been in church for 20 plus years now, but still I don't I just I'm not always comfortable in the church setting sometimes. And so I think that would have changed my perspective a little bit if people had have spoke into my life a little bit more and been a little bit more connected to me in that younger age. So that's what I've got.